As an investment committee member, do you think you could recreate a decision that was made 2, 3, or even 5 years ago? If you're your typical investment committee member, you probably can't. Now, I'm talking today about the governance and documentation that comes with the defined contribution plan, and this is not fun stuff. This is the drudgery part of the defined contribution plan, but it is no less important. And it's important because of the institutional knowledge that has a tendency to die out or decay through the changeovers that naturally occur in membership for an investment committee. It's kind of like a game of telephone. You know, pass from one person to the next, and by the time it gets to the end, it's a completely different story. The second reason is conditions change across time, and the conditions that were in place when you made the decision may not be the same conditions 5 years from now. And you need to make sure that you are clearly documenting why you made the decision 5 years ago and what the conditions were surrounding making that decision, because they may be different. For example, there's an ongoing debate about passive and active management in defined contribution plans. Which is better to use and better to offer to participants? And I can guarantee you that 5 years from now, the conditions that exist for passive and active are going to be different than the conditions that exist today. So if you're making a decision today about the use of passive or active management, it's important to document the reasons why you decided to go to one side of that equation or another. So what I want to do is to talk to you about today is, what do you need for a strong governance program? The first thing you need is the structure. You need the charters in place that enable an investment committee, that talk to the decision-making authority that that investment committee has, and that also talk to the reporting responsibilities that that investment committee has. You also need the policies and procedures in place. So you need to have an investment policy statement. I think every investment committee has an investment policy statement at this point. But what's becoming more important, given all the litigation and the spotlight that's been put on fees and expenses, is to have an expensing policy statement and to live by that. The next item you need is very clear documentation. This is an area where most investment committees fall down. They don't always have the documentation they need to be able to create that track record of making clear decisions that are aligned with the policies that have been adopted. You know, we've seen many cases where prudent experts bring into the committee 100, 150 pages of data. And if I was an investment committee member, the last thing I'd want to do is to have to go back and rely on that to determine why the investment committee made a decision that it did or didn't want to make in there. And as, you know, it can be shorter. It doesn't mean that documentation has to be very long in and of itself, but it just needs to be clear, and it needs to be comprehensive in terms of why decisions were made, both from reports you get from third parties as well as the minutes that you take during the committee. And the last item you need is to articulate the roles and responsibilities of the providers, of the people who are helping you with the defined contribution plan. And there is a growing trend where investment committees are delegating more of the investment decision making to third parties. And if that's the case, then you need to document not only which decisions are being delegated, why you delegated those decisions, and you also need to document that you are supervising those people you are delegating the decisions to. Delegating the decisions doesn't mean abrogating decisions. It means you still have some oversight responsibility, and you need to demonstrate that you are pursuing that oversight. For example, we had one client who had hired a prudent expert that was willing to take on more investment decision making, known as an outsourced chief investment officer, and we were benchmarking their progress. We asked the outsourced chief investment officer who made the decision about using or not using passive management in certain asset classes. The outsourced chief investment officer pointed to the plan sponsor. We asked the plan sponsor that same question. Who made the decisions about the use of passive or active management in certain asset classes? They pointed to the outsourced chief investment officer. That essentially means that decision wasn't being made. And that means the documentation wasn't clear enough about who was making that decision. So it's important to have a strong governance structure. It's important to keep that institutional knowledge. It's important to document the circumstances around which decisions were made, so you have that track record that you can pull out of your file. I hope this was useful to you, and if you'd like to talk more about governance structures, please reach out to us through our website.